boy who fought Hitler? Thousands of Jewish teens fought the Nazis during World War II. Ben Kahm was one of them. Here's a picture of him right here. You probably know a kid like Ben Kahm, the boy with big ideas and a quick smile, the one who will lead you off on an adventure and make sure you get home safe. Ben grew up in a different place and time than you, in Warsaw, Poland, in the 1920s and 30s. But he was enough like you and your friends that you should be able to picture him. Short but strong, his clothes rumpled from wrestling with his little brothers, his eyes bright and playful. Try to imagine Ben running through the crowded city streets with his friends, zigzagging around finely dressed ladies and fruit sellers with men and long gray beards. You can hear him laughing with his friends and shouting goodbyes as they all head home for dinner. But wait, do you hear that too? As Ben walks by a neighbor, the man hisses something in Polish. Brandy Zidid, dirty Jew. Ben's skin prickles, but he doesn't glance at the man. The truth is that he's used to these words. Anti-Semitism, prejudice against Jewish people, is a fact of life in Warsaw, as in many European cities. Like most of Warsaw's 350,000 Jews, Ben tries not to think about it too much. The man's words are like the bitter wind that blows off the nearby Vistula River. Ben shivers for a few moments, but he holds his head up and keeps walking. He quickly forgets about the man. Keep picturing Ben in your mind as he walks up to his spacious apartment, where his 4 little brothers happily pounce on him, where his father looks up from his evening papers and smiles, where his mother serves a delicious dinner in their cozy dining room. So now, just like we have before, we're going to pause here, and I would like you to jot down just either some bullet points or a sentence that could summarize what we just read. Sentence or two. Pause your video and jot it down before I reveal what I've written. I said that Ben Kahm is a boy just like us, living a very similar life. However, he was Jewish growing up in Poland in the 1920s and 30s, and therefore is a victim of anti-Semitism, or a hatred towards Jews. I'm not sure why he doesn't like the word Semitism, but Jews does need to be capitalized. This section is called Hateful Lies. This is where Ben's story takes a sharp turn into one of the most evil chapters in history, the Holocaust. As Ben's family is enjoying their dinner, Germany's leader, a man named Adolf Hitler, is plotting the destruction of Europe's 9.5 million Jewish people. Hitler rose to power in Germany during a time when the country was struggling. In 1918, Germany had been defeated in World War I. The German people felt humiliated, tired, and bitter. Hitler, his political party, the Nazis, gained power by tapping into those feelings. Jewish people had lived in Germany and throughout Europe for centuries, but their unique religion and rituals often kept them separate. As a result, some people were prejudiced against them. Hitler stood in crowded auditoriums and gave speeches filled with hateful lies about Jews. He said they were subhuman and an inferior race. He said they could not be trusted. His lies fanned the flames of century-old prejudice against Jewish people. Eliminate the Jews, Hitler proclaimed, and you will eliminate all of Germany's problems. Hitler's words spread from Germany to other countries in Europe. Many people turned against their Jewish neighbors. Synagogues were destroyed. Jewish-owned businesses were vandalized or burned to the ground. By 1945, 6 million Jewish men, women, and children would be dead. Nazi troops and their helpers shot them, starved them, worked them to death. Many died in prisons known as concentration camps. The Nazis built these prison camps just for the purpose of killing Jewish people. For most of Ben's childhood, he and his family were happy and comfortable. Nobody suspected that this kind of hateful violence was even possible. Who would imagine such things? Ben would say decades later, who could imagine? the German people were feeling weak and defeated. They had lost World War I, and he blamed the Jews. He spread awful lies about them and got the German people to turn on them. This section is called Nazi Invasion. Ben was 18 when German troops invaded Poland and World War II began. With shocking speed, life for Poland's Jews changed. Many lost their businesses or were fired from their jobs. They were not allowed to set foot in public parks or libraries or go out after 5 p.m. Anyone who broke these laws could be shot. Ben's parents wanted to leave Poland, but Hitler and the Nazis quickly took over most of the countries in Europe. Escape became impossible. And then, starting on October 12, 1940, all Jewish people in Warsaw and the surrounding towns were forced to move into one tiny area of the city. The area, which became known as the Warsaw Ghetto, was surrounded by a 10-foot wall topped with barbed wire and broken glass. Armed police herded hundreds of Jewish people through the streets. Ben looked with sorrow at those around him, women holding tight to their babies, men in business suits, teachers from a school, little girls wearing their fanciest shoes and dresses. No one was permitted to bring more than a few belongings. Ben saw sneering policemen shove an old woman who lagged behind the crowd. The policeman's eyes were filled with disgust. Ben gripped his younger brother's hand, his heart pounding with fear and horror. The Nazis and their helpers, he realized, did not see him as human. He felt like he was an animal. Helpless, a helpless animal. And I'll draw your attention up here to this picture. This picture is the Warsaw Ghetto. This photograph was taken in 1943 by a Nazi official. It shows Jewish people being ordered out of the ghetto. Most are thought to have been murdered in concentration camps. It's so sad. Roughly 400,000 Jewish people were crammed into the ghetto. Ben's family moved into one small room. The gates to the ghetto closed. So this is a really long section. So what I wanted to do is I wanted to break it down. So here is where I decided to pause and sum up what I had read so far. So I'd like you to pause and just try and, if you could, in a sentence or two, explain what's going on here. I said that German troops were called Nazis and they invaded Poland and other areas, ordering all Jewish people to move to ghettos. The ghetto were surrounded by barbed wire and broken glass. They were not allowed to take many things. Let's keep reading. Roughly 400,000 Jewish people were crammed into the ghetto. Ben's family moved into a small room. The gates of the ghetto closed. Nobody was allowed to leave. Rage at the Nazis burned inside. Ben, as the life in the ghetto became increasingly desperate. One day, a policeman drove through the streets with a smile on his face, firing his gun. An epidemic of the deadly illness, typhus, swept through the crowded apartments, killing thousands. Each person was given only a tiny amount of food. So they had a terrible illness that spread through these crowded, tiny little apartments. They obviously weren't given any health care or anything to take care of themselves with, and obviously not good hygiene if you're all of your families crammed into one room. So how would you sum up this last section we read here, the second half of Nazi invasion? How would you sum it up? I said the Nazis did awful things to the Jewish people while they were in the ghettos. Ben recalls the time when an officer drove through the streets and shot his gun at anyone and everyone. So let's read Jewish fighters. And here's a picture of some rebel fighters. Jewish partisans, like these young men and women, built secret bases in forests and launched attacks against Nazis. Like many young people, Ben soon learned tricks for sneaking out of the ghetto to find food for his family. There were holes in the walls and tunnels that led to the other side. With his blonde hair and blue eyes, Ben blended in easily with the rest of the Polish population. Plus, he had an aunt on the outside. None of her neighbors knew she was Jewish, and she managed to help Ben without attracting suspicion. Even with his aunt's help, though, Ben and his family were slowly starving. They could do nothing, it seemed, except wait for death. But Ben would soon learn that he could do something after all, if he dared. Tens of thousands of people, including thousands of Jews, were fighting back against the Nazis. They were called teenagers, mostly boys, but a few girls as well. They blew up factories, sabotaged railroads, stole weapon shipments, and upset the flow of supplies to German troops. In several partisan forest camps, fighters also protected large numbers of Jewish families who had escaped the ghettos. The most famous partisan group was commanded by the Belzlickies, 3 Jewish brothers who had fled a ghetto in Russia after the Nazis murdered their family. The brothers fought German troops though their focus was protecting a community of about 1,200 Jewish men, women, and children. Stories about partisans like the Belzlickies spread through the Warsaw Ghetto, offering a glimmer of hope to boys like Ben. One day, Ben's aunt told him about a Polish partisan group in a forest 100 miles away. With his family's blessing, Ben snuck out and joined up. So pause your video here. How would we sum up Jewish fighters? How would we sum that up? Well, that's what happened in this section that's important. I said that Ben tried to help his family by sneaking out and bringing back more food for them. His family was starving. Ben learns of a group called partisans, people who fought back. With his family's approval, he sneaks away from the ghetto and joins the group. This section is called Terrible Rumors. Ben struggled to adjust to his life with the partisans. He had to learn to shoot, to fall asleep on the cold forest ground, to sneak up on Polish policemen and steal their weapons. Danger lurked everywhere in the hostile countryside, where Poles could earn rewards for turning in Jewish people into the Nazis. But Ben's experiences had toughened him. His bravery and skills soon earned him the respect of the most experienced fighters. A few months later, after joining the partisans, Ben received word that his family was in trouble. He rushed back to Warsaw and was shocked by what he found in the ghetto. Orphaned children begged in the streets. His family was living in despair, sharing their single room with 3 other families. Each week, the police rounded up more people and sent them away to work as slaves. None returned. There were terrible rumors that the Nazis were murdering Jewish people in concentration camps. Ben stayed in the Warsaw Ghetto for 2 days, sneaking in and out to steal food for his family. He wanted to take his brothers back to the forest with him, but many in the ghetto were sure the war would soon be over. Ben's parents believed the younger boys would be safer in the ghetto. For the rest of his life, Ben would break down in tears when he recalled the moment he left his parents and brothers to rejoin the partisans. He would never see his family again. How sad. Very, very sad. So how can we sum up terrible rumors? How can we sum up this section? Pause your video and jot down a sentence or two on how you would sum this up. I said that shortly after joining the group, he finds out his family is in trouble. He rushes back and finds them starving and suffering. Nazis are sending people to be slaves and never return. Ben's family thinks the war will soon be over and stay in the camp. And I also said, because I didn't have enough room on that one, he will never see them again. This last section is called Luck and Sorrow. For the next 2 years, Ben fought with a group of about 1,600 partisans. Their base was in the forest, and it was almost like a town. There were cooks who prepared food, cobblers who repaired shoes, and musicians who provided moments of joyful escape. Ben volunteered for dangerous missions, blowing up trains that carried supplies to German troops. Often, he and his fellow partisans discovered Jewish people hiding in the forest. Old, young, children, Ben said. We took them with us, and they survived the war. In 1945, the war ended with Germany's defeat. Many of the Nazis who helped murder Ben's